Okay, Megillat Esther. And you can find the Megillah, of course, in a separate Megillah if you have, but if you're using the Chumash, the Art Scroll, it's on page 1252. Let's begin all over again. This time, we're going to start from the very beginning, and we'll see what we can learn, what we can discern from the text itself and from commentaries, of course, from Soloveitchik, and you'll hear a number of comments from the late Rabbi Lamb, etc. Okay, 1252. Let's just get our feet wet with the text itself. And it came to pass in the days of Achashverosh, the Achashverosh who reigned from Hodu to Cush over 127 provinces. He was a pretty powerful man. That in these days, when King Achashverosh sat in his royal throne, which was in the Shushan capital, in the third year of his reign, he made a feast for all of his officials and his servants. So who's the first party for? The elite, correct? Yeah. The elite, pay close attention, okay. So then the army of Persia and Media, the nobles and the officials of the provinces being present. So all of the powerful people of the country, of the countries. So what does he do at this party? He immediately we're told, he displays all of his riches. He's schwitzen, right? Okay, he's showing off who he is. Es kvod malchuso v'esyakar tiferes gedulaso yamim rabim shmonim ma'as yom. He throws a party. This guy knows how to throw parties. Mm-hmm. He's throwing a party with splendor of his excellence and majesty for many years. How long? 180 days. That's a long party. Yeah, that's a long party. But remember, it's the first party, and it's the party for the elite. Ubimlot hayamim ha'ila asa hamelech chol ha'am hanimsaim b'shushan habira lemigadol v'ad katan mishteh shivat yamim v'chatzar ginat bitan hamelech. And when these days were finished, if you will, the king made a week-long feast for all the people who were present in Shushan, the capital. All. When I mean all, the Megillah tells us, from great to small alike, everybody in the court of the garden of the king's palace. So he opens up the doors. Come on. Everybody join, right? And what kind of party does he throw here? Chur karpas uschelas ahuz bechadlei vutz vargaman al glilei chesed amudei shesh mitos zahav chesed aritzpat bahat bashesh vidar vasocheres. You're told details in the Megillah. Megillat Esther has more details than almost any other sefer in Tanakh. It is detail oriented. We're going to prove this story, because we're going to tell you every detail. Now you go and you study it. Go ahead. You'll find that this was reality. That's what Esther is doing by detailing all of this. And so she goes on and she writes, there were hangings of white, fine cotton and blue wool, right, held with cords of fine linen and purple wool upon silver rods and marble pillars. The couches of gold and silver were on a pavement of green and white, and shell and onyx marble. Quite a spread, right? Quite an impressive. He brought in, what we do now, right? We bring in all that furniture to the simchas, He brought, right? Oh, it was staged. Everything was staged. Everything was staged, right? But quite expensive stuff that we're told. And the drinks were served in golden goblets. No two goblets were alike, and the royal wine in abundance according to the bounty of the king. It was flowing, bar open, right? Totally open. You can, and it didn't stop. V'hashtiya, and then we're told in Pasuk Ches, v'hashtiya chadat ein ones, and the drinking was according to the law without coercion. You could drink, in other words, to your heart's desire. Whatever you wanted, whatever type of drink you wanted, it was there, right? Al kol rav beito lasot kirtzon ish va'ish. For so the king had ordered all of the officers of his house that they should do according to every man's pleasure. you can order anything you want. Okay. And while that's going on, Vashti herself was making a feast for women in the royal house of King Ahasuerus. Now something happens on the seventh day, right? On the seventh day, we're told, he is quite inebriated, right? The king is quite inebriated. Amar lemuhuman bista charbona bikta vavakta zeisar vakar v'charkas shivas asarisim hamisharasim espnei hamelach Achashverosh. And the king was merry with wine. He ordered all of these 7 chamberlains who attend and who took care of the king. Lavi et Vashti, he orders them. And what does he order them to do? Pay close attention. What is happening in Pasuk Yud Aleph? Lavi et Vashti hamalka lifnei hamelech becheter malchut. Right? Laharot hamim v'hasarim et yafya ki tovat marehi. He orders them to go and tell her she is being summoned. Right? He doesn't do it. He sends his chamberlains. Okay, to bring Vashti, the queen, before the king wearing the royal crown, to show off to the people and the officials her beauty, for she was quite a beautiful woman to see. The Tam'ain HaMalka, no, she refuses. And she refuses. And we'll go back to what she refused, because you have to read very carefully what she's refusing. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment conveyed by the chamberlains. And he gets very angry, right? He gets very angry that she has the chutzpah to refuse to come. And then the king conferred with the experts who knew, in other words, his little cabinet. He confers with them. He knew the times, for such was the king's procedure, to turn to all who knew the law and judgment. The Akarove loved Karshana, Shesar, Admasa, Tarshish, Meres, Marsana, Memuchan. Again, names, details. You're getting this sense, right? This is really being documented very carefully. And she lists everybody, those close to me. You want to know who they were? Here are their names, right? Shivat, Sarei, Paras, Madai, Ro'e Pnei HaMelech HaYoshvim Rishona b'Malchut. These were 7 officers of Paras Madai who had access to the king and who sat first in the kingdom as to what should be done legally. And he's conferring with them. What should we do? My wife, my queen, has refused to listen to the command that I sent via the chamberlains. We're going to stop there. Let's stop there for a moment. Okay, what information do you have in this opening chapter? And do you have any questions on that opening chapter? We've learned 15 sentences, 15 psukim. What question do you ask? Yeah, what's the question
because the first party were the men and women separated.
It seems to be, yeah. The parties were separated, clearly. So men were kings.
180 days of party.
We're not told how long hers was, but we assume because it matched his.
And the other question I have is, like, historically, for what I thought I understood, the Queen Vashti was really a very elite queen. She was very high up. Ahasuerus.
You're bringing information outside of the text.
Oh,
okay, which is fine. Yeah. We're going to use that, but that's outside of the text. Yeah. I want to know, when you read this opening chapter and read these 15 psukim, does anything bother you about this?
Why did she refuse to go?
No, it's something much more basic. No, you're going to details. I'm asking a general question. When I read these 15 psukim, does this have anything to do with this? Exactly. Who cares in Megillat Esther? It's Esther's story. Right. Why do we spend chapter 1, if you will, on all of these details that
we need the backstory on
what
they deposed Vashti, who was the right
only. Are you getting that from this?
Well, not until we know. It's foreshadowing, but like,
okay. So what did you get from up until he kills her? Oh, he doesn't. Well, by the way, we don't know he kills her. Nobody knows he kills her. That's our
Right, but
conclusion.
she's done.
Nowhere in Megillat Esther does it say that Vashti was killed.
I didn't know that.
No, but nowhere. She disappears. She disappears from the face of the earth. How does she disappear? I don't know. Was she poisoned like this guy in prison in Russia, in Siberia? I don't know.
Well, who wrote this book?
You said
Esther. Esther writes it. Oh, she's living through this. She
But
knows it very well.
That's not, how does she know who is
This becomes not very. This becomes public knowledge. This is on the public record. This is on the public. What?
Yeah. What's going on? She wasn't in the.
No, that's what she just asked. So this is public record.
Like she's
This
in
is public
Western
record.
With the Herald.
This is public record that she knows. She knows. She knows, and she's detailing it. But the main question that you have to ask is, what does this chapter do for the story of Esther? For the story of what's the story of Esther all about? Why do we have this why do we have this well, one second. Why do we have Sefer Esther in Tanakh? What is the message of Sefer Esther? What's Megillat Esther all about?
The Hoshua, that Hashem always is saving the
Oh.
Jews from Amalek or whatever. it is,
Okay.
right?
So how many brachos do you make before we start the Megillah? Three. Okay, what are they? Al Mikra Megillah.
Right.
She'asa nisim lavosenu. Vayamim ha'hem. Bazman hazeh. They happen then, they should happen now. Correct?
Yeah.
God, in other words, this is a story about Jewish redemption. Why is chapter 1 so detailed, so important to introduce Megillat Esther, a story about Jewish redemption?
Wow.
That's the question you have to ask. And when you study that, and when you study this Sefer, that's the first question that Rabbi Soloveitchik asks. He says, I don't get it. This whole chapter, I read only 15 of 22 psukim, right? We'll get to the rest of the psukim. But just to give you, to wet your feet, right? You have to always read the text before you can comment on it. Now, whoops, okay, I have to let some more people in.
It's like
Okay.
what's happening today. Planes are flying.
This is
Same in the Persian. They're trying to wipe us out always.
what you mean. Nothing changes. Everything stays the same. Okay. So now let's start analyzing and seeing what we can deduce. Again, the major question is, what does this have to do with Jewish redemption? And Rabbi Soloveitchik says it has everything to do with Jewish, and there are so many lessons. And not only Rabbi Soloveitchik, we'll see others as well. So, Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh. The Rav asks a very simple. Well, let me start with a medrash. The Gemara in Megillah Yud Amud Beis says, wherever a Sefer Tanakh begins with the words Vayehi, it indicates trouble is coming. Can you give me another example? Vayehi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim, which is the opening to the book of Ruth. Trouble is around the corner. Chazal say those words. Whenever a Sefer in Tanakh opens with the words Vayehi b'mei, Vayehi, you got problems coming. Vayehi b'mei Achashverosh, or Vayehi b'mei Shvot HaShoftim, you know you got problems.
Because in Hebrew, Vayehi could be translated to Vayhaya, like Oy Vavoy, Vayhaya. It was terrible.
Yeah, well, that's what Chazal is saying. Okay, and we have this here, and we have it in Rus. That clearly is happening here. But the Rav wonders: is this opening pasuk is here just to set a depressing mood for us? Is it or a historic perspective that is not very positive? Is that what it's doing? And the Rav feels that this pasuk is crucial. It adds so much more. He feels it sets the stage for understanding the whole Megillah. Read those words. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. You want to understand this book? You have to understand this is happening in one man's reign. And who is he? Achashverosh. And Chazal will debate, and Chazal does debate. Could you analyze this personality? Is Achashverosh an idiot? Which some want to say. Right?
Low-class person.
Well, is he a nar? Is he a tippish? Is he a fool or is he a child? Who is he? Or is he just plain a Russia? What kind of personality is he? He feels that it sets the stage. The Megillah is challenging the reader, the Rav says, in these opening words to probe, find out what motivates this guy. Because if you understand what motivates him, what makes him tick, you'll understand the whole book. You'll understand everything. It only could have happened, this kind of a story could only happen because he is in charge. The answer is found in those words, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh. In other words, this whole story couldn't have ever happened if it was in anybody else's reign. It's Achashverosh. And the wording follows to support this, by the way. Notice what happens here, right? He is an erratic, strange personality. And everything he does is erratic, and he's paranoid. He's paranoid par excellence. The word Vayhi b'mechahu Achashverosh. What's the next word? Hamolech. Hamolech means who was ruling. Tells us we must appreciate his state of mind. Who was ruling? It paints for us a picture of one who is still trying to establish his rule as king. He's yet to be king, if you will. Note something fascinating. The Medrash in Esther Rabbah notes, how many times is Achashverosh mentioned in this pasuk? Two.
Yeah.
And what's missing? The title. Melech. Melech, from here on in, you never see his name without the title Melech. But in this opening sentence, there's no Melech. And twice, not once, right? Melech is missing twice, the Medrash says. So what was he doing this? Hamolech, you know what he was doing for the first 3 years? Because when does this story start?
7 years after.
It starts 3 years into his reign. We're told that. When does he throw the party? Pay attention to the text, right? He throws the party only in his 3rd year of his reign. What is he doing during the first 3 years?
He's trying to establish his.
He's conquering. He's conquering one country after another country after another country. He's an unbelievable military man. He's going from one country, Mihodu v'ad Kush, from Ethiopia to India.
So he didn't inherit the kingdom intact.
He did not inherit anything. He is, Chazal is telling us, he is a control. He is Hamolech. He's establishing himself by doing what? By conquering country after country after country. He therefore judges everything through the eyes of a military man who has to conquer every country. And what does that make him? What does that make him? Paranoid. Always worried about the guy behind him. Military men are always worried about the people behind him, correct? And he is worried like crazy, Okay, continues on. Pasuk. So that's immediately the opening sentence is telling us crucial information. Number one, it's Achashverosh. Who Achashverosh? You want to understand this book? Understand who he is. Hamolech. He's conquering the countries. He is not inheriting it. That tells us something else about him, which Miriam was quoting from her knowledge from years and years and years of learning. What is that? He doesn't come from lineage of royalty. He doesn't come from lineage of.
His father was a very, very successful.
No, we don't know. We don't know anything. We don't know anything about his father from the text. We don't know anything about his father. We do know that his father-in-law and his father-in-law's father were royalty.
Yeah.
Vashti comes from royalty, but he doesn't come from royalty at all. And this
Royalty by marrying.
Yes, 100%.
So I can understand why she would say, no, I'm not going to.
Oh, okay, we'll get to that. Okay, so
Obviously,
now,
they had problems in their marriage prior.
well, we'll see. Okay, now you're bringing other information. Okay,
But that's another
I
thing that make him nervous if he isn't royalty by blood. Then the same way he came and he conquered, somebody else could.
That's why he's paranoid. Exactly. That's why he's paranoid. He's
Right.
worried for his back. 100%. Go to Pasuk Gimel. Bishna shalosh l'malcho, It's the third year. So it takes him 3 years to conquer these countries. Asa mishteh, excuse me. Asa mishteh l'chol sarav avadav pel parasim v'adaya partamim v'sarei medinos lifanav. What does he do? In the third year of his reign, he made a feast for all of the officials and his servants, the army of Persia and Media, the nobles and officials of the provinces being present. The first question the reader must ask is what the Megillah and Esther Rabbah asks. Why is this the third year? Why is he that's right? So it answers that for the first 3 years, he is doing what? He's conquering countries because the words of the Medrash Rabbah, he is beli keter ubeli kisei. You know what that means? He has no royalty to him. Without any royal foundation to make his position firm. Bachrach, who's he used to, in many years, he taught at Michlala for many years. He wrote a beautiful sefer called Kitvuni L'Dorot. Bachrach analyzes Midrashim. That's what he basically does. He takes the text and he analyzes Midrashim. Notes that since he wasn't from royalty, he had to show off his royalty. Take a look at what he does here. Pasuk Dalet, Baharoto et Osher Kvod Malchuto. How does he run this party? He shows off. He's a show off. Royalty never shows off. Royalty doesn't have to show off because royalty, by definition, we know they're wealthy, right? They don't have to show me. If they're showing off their wealth, that means they're not really royalty.
Very nouveau.
That's exactly. They are very nouveau riche, and that's and very insecure. Exactly what you're being told. Baharoto, he doesn't come. That's why Chazal say everything he's doing is demonstrating he doesn't come from royalty. If he comes from royalty, the one thing you would never do is show off your wealth. But then Rav Soloveitchik asks the second question: what in the world does a half-drunk mob feasting, indulging, and passing judgment on the beauty of a woman have to do with the story of our redemption? Again, the Rav asks a simple question. A half-drunk mob feasting, indulging, and passing judgment on the beauty of a woman have to do with the story of Purim. In other words, why should Jews care how the king parties and with whom? That is the real question. Do I really care about how the king parties? He throws a party. Let him throw a party. He invites whoever he wants. Why do I need to know that? What impact does this have on hundreds of thousands of Jews living in the 127 provinces under the rule of Achashverosh? As the story continues, we realize that it has a tremendous impact on our lives. This fact teaches us, Rav Soloveitchik says, a crucial lesson in life. And I quote the Rav: there are no neutral events in human history which the Jew may dismiss as irrelevant. He cannot ignore, in my words, the daily paper. He has to, I'm using my terminology, people don't even read papers anymore. The news. You cannot ignore the news. The Jew is totally involved in all events and in all major struggles. What's happening in Ukraine has an effect on all of us. And what's happening in the world, in China, has an effect on all of us. We shouldn't think we're parochial. We only have to worry about our little community. Not at all. What the Megillat Esther is teaching you at the very beginning is everything that happens in the world has an impact on this little Jewish people, right?
Rabbi, I have a question. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Regarding the party, didn't the Jews participate in the party, and weren't a lot of the vessels coming from the?
Where does it say that? Where does it say that? It says it from everybody was invited. We're going to talk about that. We'll see. Okay. We see this fact right now in so many ways. Not only after October 7th, right? And how the world reacts to it. That's impacting everything that happens. We can't wipe our hands of any news. Rabbi Norman Lamb notes that the Gemara in Megillah, Yud Beis Amid Aleph, records a fascinating conversation Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai has with his students. The Gemara is telling us the following on Megillah, Yud Beis Amid Aleph. Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asks his students, why were the Jews of the generation of Purim found worthy of destruction. He's meeting his Talmidim and he says, what did they do so wrong that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed them to be threatened with annihilation? That was the question. What did we do so wrong at the time of Esther, at the time of Mordechai, that we deserved to be destroyed?
Who asked that?
Rashbi, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, 12a in the Gemara Megillah. And the students responded. Listen how this is the conversation happening in the base medrash. And he says, guys, what do you think was the reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that generation, they could be threatened with annihilation, right? And the students answered, because they consented to join the great feast tendered by the evil Achashverosh, because they went to the party. They went, Migadol ve'ad Kotel, everybody, they went to the party. According to the Medrash, Mordechai had advised them stay away from the party. The Medrash says, do not participate. But the allure of the party of the king, with everything that he's doing, brought them to the party. So they went.
They had the vessels from the base.
Well, you're jumping.
Okay.
We'll see. This Talmudic observation offers us two lessons, though, to Rabbi Lamb. The first is, sometimes man invites retribution and hatred by how he deports himself, how he acts. That's lesson one. In other words, this doesn't excuse Haman, Rabbi Lamb notes. Haman is evil. He's a monster. That doesn't remove the fact that he's a monster. But yet, and that doesn't remove the fact that he's an anti-Semite. But yet, they're nevertheless being taught in that Gemara, Rabbi Lamb says, that we must be careful not to incite and not to provoke the hatred of our fellow man. But why would our participation in the king's party be something that we should have avoided? Why can't we go to the party? That's a good question. Why can't we go? What was so bad about going to the party? Furthermore, didn't Haman use the fact that we were isolated from everybody, when he's describing our sin to the Achashverosh? What does he say? This is a nation that's totally different. They totally isolate themselves, right? That's what he says. So, hey, are we feeding his accusation against us? Wait, you're saying, no, we shouldn't have gone. Mordechai told them not to go. It doesn't make sense. So Rabbi Ram suggests that Chazal is teaching us via irony a tremendous lesson. And I quote Rabbi Lam: the more the Jews tried to, quote unquote, pass as pure Persians, the more the Hamans considered us different. The more we tried to emulate them, the more they thought we were different. The more they tried to blur their identities in wine and drunkenness, the more their Jewishness stood out. That's quote Rabbi Lamb. In other words, the irony here is the more we want to emulate and be just like them and not be proud of who we are, the more they hate us. The more they hate us. Two more seconds. Rabbi Lamb also suggests that maybe the story is telling, quote unquote, Rabbi Lamb, the 18,500 Jews that lived in Shushan deported themselves as nouveau riche. That's exactly what he says. They deported themselves as nouveau riche. They deported themselves as prosperous. They're going to the party and they're showing off who they are, right? They're willing to demonstrate, hey, we have newfound influence and affluence, and we should be socially acceptable. When we act like that and we want to assimilate with everybody, what happens when we act in an ostentatious fashion? It comes to bite us. So that's also a lesson within this story, right? At the very, very beginning, because you're right. Who did he invite? Migadol ve'ad katan, which would include the Jewish community as well. You had a question?
Yeah, if there were 127 nations altogether, I mean, this goes, I guess,
From
just
India to Ethiopia.
in the first one, but each of these countries have their own, they're different and they're unique,
Right,
and no one targeted them.
right.
They were allowed to have
Don't
their
we
own
have that at
country.
the UN today too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
We
right,
always target Israel.
right.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
The same.
Okay, continue on. Go to, let's take a look. Let's continue on. Now jump to Pasuk Hey. Uvimlos hayamim ha'eleh, also hamelech lechol ha'am hanimsaim b'shushan abira, limigadol va'akaton mishteh shivat yamim b'chatzar ginat bitan hamelech. And when these days were fulfilled, he does what? After the 180-day party, he does a 7-day party. For whom? For whom?
Just the ones in Shushan, though.
That's the people in Shushan. Now, take a note. This is a brilliant observation from Rabbi Lamb. May he rest in peace. Rabbi Lamb says everything gets repeated. Twos play a major role in this book. Everything gets repeated over and over and over again. For example, and I quote him, the repetition of certain things twice seems to crop up all through the work in a manner that begs explanation. Why is two? Everything gets repeated. Not in any other book in Tanakh does two play such an important role. For example, and I'll give you an example. There are 2 drinking parties, one for the nobility and one for the masses. There are 2 feasts, one for Vashti, right? And one for Esther. They throw one for Vashti, one for Esther. There's a repetition of the gathering of the maidens at the beauty contest to choose the queen, even though we'll get this into that's next chapter, even though Esther has been chosen. It's repeated all over again. Esther invites the king and Haman to twice. Once would have sufficed. She could have achieved what she wanted by once, right? Could have easily accused Haman at the first party. Or the legislation of 2 days of Purim, one for the walled cities, right? There's Purim and Shushan Purim. There is no parallel, Rabbi Lamb notes, anywhere else in Torah, anywhere else in Halacha, that we have a Sukkot on this day, but another Sukkot on another day. We don't have that, right? It seems to defy explanation. Purim, Shushan Purim, right? Furthermore, Mordechai and Esther twice you'll see at the very end of the Sefer in Perek Tes, Mordechai and Esther twice legislate the reading of the Megillah and the laws of Purim, even though once would suffice. What is going on? How do we understand this constant focus on the repetition of 2? Fascinating question. Rabbi Lamb suggests this is a subtle way that the Megillah is reacting to the dominant Persian culture. The dominant Persian and religious culture of Persia at the time, and the Persian Jew at that time would sense it right away. Why? Because he lives in that culture, right? He would sense it right away. And this is the words of Rabbi Lamb. A subtle polemic, sardonic and satiric, even humorous in nature against the dualism of ancient Persian religion. They believed in dualism. God of the sun, God of the moon, God of the earth, right? They believed in twos. The Persian culture was a duality, didn't believe in monotheism, it believed in twos. By emphasizing the number 2 in the story of the Jewish redemption, is exactly what this story is all about. It meant to emphasize that the very number that characterized the Persian religion was the one utilized by the one God, right, of Israel to secure his people's triumph over the Persian tyrant. Is everybody following? It's such a subtle, brilliant idea. They believed in 2. We believe in 1. They believed in duality. We believed in monotheism. The God of the world, namely HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is going to use their duality to demonstrate our redemption from that duality. So he adds in parentheses, by the way, had the Megillah been written in a Christian country, perhaps you would have found 3s being described, right? 3s being described. And he does note that this is what the Torah does all the way back in Yetzias Mitzrayim, when we left Mitzrayim. There the pagan deities were what? The Nile, the frogs, the sheep, and so on. And what was used to demonstrate our redemption? We flipped all of their gods on their heads, if you will, right? Becoming the instruments of the redemption of Israel. We took their gods and we turned them upside down. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did, right? So here we have the dualism of Persia used as the medium for the salvation of the Jews by the one God in this disguised numerical polemic. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant, you'll see. If you're going to pay now, you'll pay attention to it throughout the reading of Megillah, that you'll see twice, constantly repeating. And Rabbi Lamb is arguing it may very well be a device of Chazal to demonstrate the redemption of the Jew from that culture. Okay, and by the way, we might be able to add, because if I was giving you a full introduction to Megillat Esther, which I didn't, but if you get a full introduction to Megillat Esther, one of the problems of studying Megillat Esther is you have to ask yourself, it's a beautiful story. We all love learning it. We all love hearing it. But what theological message is there? That's one of the questions that you have to ask on when you study this book. It's part of Tanakh, but what theological message is there? And now we have a theological message, don't we, of the duality. The duality is being flipped on its head for the redemption of the Jew by the one God, the only God, right? So there is a theological answer.
Gods. I mean, which
They
two?
believed, they were Zoroastrian religion. They believed in the God of the sun, the God of the moon, the God of the light, the God of dark, the God.
That's not two, it's much more.
Oh, not
Yeah, but they
two
were-
specifically. No, they
Like
they
the
always
yin and yang of
yes,
it.
they believed
Yeah.
they believed the God of night, the God of day. You know,
Yeah.
constantly in their mythology. 100%. That was what they were thinking.
It's a yin yang. Like,
Yes.
There were many, but there were
Yes.
always
Right, but it was always
rare.
two. It was always two. It was always two. Christianity multiplied it to Trinity.
Right.
Trinity, sort of by Lamb suggested as a passing comment.
Yeah.
He says, if this was written in a Christian country,
Right.
I wouldn't have been surprised if the author would have used three to teach us that lesson, because he traces it back to already the Egyptian Exodus, where we use their gods to prove they are the source for our redemption, meaning they're not gods.
They're moot.
We right? Exactly, they're mute.
I think they
Okay,
still have that's what that Zostra, whatever you called it, that name.
Zoroastrian.
Yeah, they still have that religion.
Yes. Zoroastrianism still exists 100%. Okay, so now then you get all of the details of the parties, and something then happens fascinating. Take a look at Pasuk Zayin. Pashkot b'chlei zahav b'kelim mikelim shonim. Mikelim shonim. And how do you translate that in Pasuk 7 in Zayin, right? The drinks were served in golden goblets, no two goblets alike, the royal wine in abundance, according to the bounty of the king, right? But Vashkos Mikelei Zahav Mikelim Shonim. He translates it, no two goblets alike. Mikelim Shonim. From different types of Kelim. Kelim Shonim. Do you know how the Baal Koreh reads that? When he comes to those words? In what tune does he read those words? That's right. Mikelim, he does it to Echa.
Yeah,
He suddenly switches to Echa. The tune. Mikelim Shonim. Chazal say, what do you mean no two vessels were alike? Our sages tell us Kelim Shonim were what? The Kelim from the Beis Hamikdash. The Kelim that were confiscated by Belshazzar and Nebuchadnezzar. And they were brought to Persia. They were taken to Persia. There's a fascinating discussion in Chazal. Was the Aron HaKodesh taken or not? Right? There was a whole debate of, was the Aron HaKodesh from the Bayis Rishon, from the first temple, was that one of the Kelim Shonim? Was that confiscated? Did Nebuchadnezzar take that into Golos or not? The Rambam says no. The Rambam says the Aron HaKodesh has never left Yerushalayim. The Aron HaKodesh, he says, is buried under the Har Habayis. And he says there was one panel, one tile in the Kodesh HaKadoshim that was different than all of the other tiles, and that was the tunnel, if you will, that was buried that's where the Aron was buried. That means that because the Rambam raises, the question is, the second bias, we did not have an Aron. We did not have an Aron. If you didn't have an Aron, how do you have a Kodesh HaKadoshim? What do you have? So the Rambam answers, it's there. It's just not above ground, it's below ground, right? That's one of the ways the Rambam answers. So the Rambam is of the strong opinion, and this became the consensus opinion, that no, the Aron was not taken. Was the first menorah taken? Yeah, the first menorah was taken, the shulchan was taken, whatever, kelim shonim. Many items were taken. Now, if that's so, and this is how we understand these words, kelim shonim, this is our tradition, that Achashverosh is displaying among his great wealth. What is he displaying? What's he putting out for everybody to see? Our stuff, right? Achashverosh obviously inherited this from his wife's family, right? From his predecessors. But why, however, you have to ask yourself a question. Were the Babylonian kings so interested in the sacred vessels of the Jew? The Jew is a small little people, even then. Certainly today, what are we, 15 million people? It doesn't make sense. We are so small that we don't even show up on the Chinese census as a mistake, a digital mistake. That's how small we are. And yet, we cause more tumult in the world, if you will. They're tumulting about us more than anybody else. So Rabbi Soloveitchik asks a very beautiful question. Really, when you're studying this whole story, why were the Babylonian kings so interested in our sacred vessels? Why? And they needed to display them to Migadol Va'ad Katan. Everybody in society, come, I'll show you what we got, what we took. And we took it from whom? From the small little people. The truth is, the Gentile has always been intrigued by the Jew. He has always been intrigued by the Jew. They rejected our way of life, both Islam later, first Christianity, then Islam, yet they always were intrigued by us. They rejected us, but they were always intrigued by us. They never could understand, and never will they understand, why the Jew wants to return to Yerushalayim after all these years. Why can't you make home in Persia? Here you have 127 provinces. Choose it. What do you have to go back to Yerushalayim? Our interest in that bothered them to no end, and they couldn't get their heads around it, and they couldn't understand it. And Chazal are demonstrating this, according to the Rav, by this medrash, Kelim Shonim. He's displaying whose holy articles, whose right artifacts, our artifact. From whom? From a small little people. It's amazing, right? But that's what you're being told. Yes.
But they conquered so many countries that
Right.
they used a lot of different vessels. So it wouldn't be just from us. It would be
No, 100%. But of
You know,
all,
so we were just
well,
one of
we're
the-
not told that he's showing his wealth.
Yeah.
His wealth, but Kelim Shonim in particular, there's a whole section on this these Jews. Who are the Jews?
Yeah.
They've always been fascinated with the Jew. Always. They
Vashti's about the Daniel in the lion's den, and they were like also
they-
obsessed
the
with our
midrash,
calendar. It's
100%.
all
Yeah,
from
yeah,
her-
yeah,
from
100%.
her line.
all connected.
Supports
All
what you
connected.
say.
So now go to Pasuk Yud. Bayom HaShvi'i. So now he throws, and also Vashti, right? Pasuk Tes. Vashti throws a party. Okay, we're not just told that she throws a party for the women. Bayom HaShvi'i. What happens on the seventh day? Kitov Lev HaMelech Bayoyin. Omar Limuhuman Bista Harvona Biksa, etc., etc. Right? These are the seven members of his cabinet. Bayom HaShvi'i, on the seventh day, something happens. You have to ask yourself a simple question. Why the seventh day?
Why wasn't he drunk from 180 days?
Well, right. Oh, there's a very good reason. I'm going to deal with that,
So
but you're going to have to ask another question. When does he ask for Vashti to appear? To show her
On
beauty.
the seventh day, the last day.
In whose party?
People's Party.
the masses.
Yeah.
When does he not do it?
During the
elite.
Other one.
180, he doesn't invite his wife to the, why doesn't he invite his wife to the front of the elite? Why don't you show your beauty to the elite? You know, Chazal say, they read it very carefully, very literally. Come only with your crown on. In other words, stark naked. Come stark naked. I'm going to show you. That's how Chazal understood.
Right.
They're reading it very carefully. In other words, it was uncouth. It was just disgusting. It was pornography. That's what he was doing. He was asking, right, exactly. But why on the seventh day? And this Bayom HaShvi'i, you see how Chazal, how the Rav reads, how Rabbi Lamb reads, they're very careful how Chazal reads the words. Why does the text go out of its way to tell us that this happened on the seventh day? And the answer lies in the fact, Bayom HaShvi'i, the way we observe Shvi'i and the way they do are worlds apart. It's how the Jew and the Gentile have an attitude towards the seventh day. For the Gentile, the seventh day is the day that the feasting reached its pinnacle. Bayom HaShvi'i. For the Persians, this meant a loss of dignity and a loss of decency. They abandoned all standards of morality, right? Of refinement, gone on the seventh day, which we're going to see, right? They're going to ask her to come, and then they're going to kill her because we don't know if they kill her. They're going to do something to her that's very negative, right? She's going to be banned forever. She's going to leave the face of history, whatever that means. For the Jew, however, Bayom HaShvi'i is not a day of, right? Feasting reaches its pinnacle. For that matter of fact, it's the eighth day when it comes to Yom Tov, right? Seventh day when it comes to the week. It's the pinnacle of celebration, not in a debauchery fashion, but this celebration is defined by dedication to God. On the seventh day, we act, right? We are in presence of Hashem, which elevates the human dignity to its highest level, the Rav writes. That's why it's Bayom HaShvi'i. It's not by accident. Bayom HaShvi'i, Chazal saying, take a look at how they act, take a look at how we're going to act. We have a totally different approach. Our pinnacle of celebration is what? What does Chazal say? If you didn't see this celebration, you never saw a celebration. Where was that? Where was that? Thank you. In the Beit HaMikdash, and what were you celebrating? Your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And they're celebrating what?
Getting drunk.
Getting drunk, correct. Getting drunk to a point where there is no refinement left, right? There's no morality. Bayom HaShvi'i. That's why it happens on the seventh day. 2 seconds. Let's just continue. Then take a look at this pasuk. Bayom HaShvi'i. What happens then? Kitov Leiv HaMelech Bayoyin. Right? It's our attitude towards wine, and our indulgence in wine is contrasted here as well. Not only is the seventh day, but our attitude towards all physicality. All physicality. Judaism believes that there has to be a synthesis with the world around us, right? We can either be dragged down and into the gutter by wine, or we can be lifted up and aroused to noble emotions. The Torah, unlike the Gentile lifestyle, taught the Jew how to feast responsibly. The Gemara in Psachim 107a teaches, and I quote in English, we do not sanctify the Shabbos except over wine. Right? Well, you mekadesh Shabbos al hayayin. Right? We do kiddush al hayayin. Why do we sanctify you're supposed to sanctify your Shabbos with wine. If we think about it, it's a drastic idea. It's a revolutionary idea. We're going to take that which can destroy human beings and elevate it to a source for making the most spiritual moment. What the Jew does on Shabbos, just think about what he does on Pesach. Right? On Pesach, the ultimate Jewish meal is Pesach, is Seder. The ultimate Jewish meal is Seder, right? It's the hardest meal for no question about it. But I'm reading my mother's memoirs now again, and ever since she's passed on. But I've been reading her memoirs that I got her to write, and she writes there at passing, it was the most difficult holiday for me, like for all Jewish women, but it was my most favorite. It was the ultimate. It is the Jewish meal par excellence, right? And what happens? We don't drink 1 cup, we drink 4 cups. And how do we close? What's the closing? What's the closing act? Hallel. Hallel, right? Does the Jew engage at the end of those 4 cups with a coarse talk, inappropriate talk? No. He then utters Hallel. Nishmas kol chai. Rabbi Soloveitchik used to say, Rabbi Würzburg, may rest in peace, who was one of the outstanding Talmidim of Rabbi Soloveitchik, certainly philosophically, he said the greatest moment in his life was when he was invited by Rabbi Soloveitchik to be a guest at Rabbi Soloveitchik's Seder.
Wow.
And Rabbi Würzburger describes it. We have the document, it's published. Rabbi Würzburger describes it, he says, Rabbi Soloveitchik, when he got to Nishmas kol chai, the world sings praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He said, you saw the Rav literally like lifting off his chair. Nishmas kol chai. It was like unbelievable experience, an unbelievable experience. And that's how the Jew acts. The Rav notes that the Jewish view of the meal, the Su'uda, is unknown to the Gentile. That's what Esther is writing here in a very subtle fashion. What is the Jewish attitude towards the meal, the Su'uda? It combines 2 contradictory elements. On the one hand, it's animalistic, right? It's an experience of gratifying our physical needs, correct? That's what a meal does. On the other hand, it's offering what? A sacrifice, if you will, in many ways. Our table is compared to the Mizbeach, the altar. We remarkably treat our home as the holiest object in the world, right? But how do we combine both of these elements? So our Chazal tell us in Avos, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Gimel, if 3 have eaten at a table and have not spoken words of Torah, it is as if they've eaten sacrifices to the dead, the Mishnah says. How do we do it? We elevate our table to a conversation that is productive, that is spiritual in nature, right? We debate Torah at our tables. We discuss. I remember as a kid at my father and mother's table, it was an intellectual feast. No, it was not only the food, it was an intellectual feast. We discussed every problem that was confronting the world, that was confronting the Shabbos meal did not go fast. The Shabbos meal was one where we were just a conversation occurred. What's going on in the world? What does that mean to the Jew? What does that mean to the world? And Torah was inserted all the time. That, and I remember this picture I have also because Ruchama describes that how her mother, Zichrono Livracha, said they were running from the Nazis. My mother-in-law was 9-10 years old at the time, but she had a picture and she would tell us this. They were running from the Nazis from Belgium through France, then eventually to America. And as they're running ahead of the Nazis to get out, when came Shabbos, Ruchama Zaidi sat down and had his family observe Shabbos, if you will, as if on the run. There was a Shabbos table. There was an experience. And what was the experience? An elevation of exactly this, of a Sudas Shabbos, of a conversation, of a Torah being taught. I have that vision. I remember my mother-in-law, Zichrono Livracha, describing that to us. And it's never left me. That's the Jewish attitude towards Seudah. Furthermore, the meal in Judaism has another goal. It's the idea that the Jew does not eat alone. Chazal say, when you celebrate Sukkot, if you eat, in particular, Sukkot is called Chag of Simchas Yom Tov, right? The Chag, the ultimate festival. We invite the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are within our gates, don't we? Isn't that what we're supposed to do? The meal is transformed into a chesed opportunity. That's how the meal of all meals begins. How does Seder begin? Holach ma'anya diachola, come. Kol dichvin yesei. Anybody who needs, come. Come. That we make that declaration at the beginning of the meal of all meals. We are going to transform our meal, number one, into a spiritual experience, and number two, into a chesed opportunity. And all of this is being alluded to in these first few psukim of the introduction. So to wrap it up, because it's getting late. So what do we see as an introduction? This chapter is crucial because it sets the tone for the whole book. Number one, it tells us the story that you're going to be hearing is wild and crazy. That's what we're being told. It's wild and crazy. It only could happen because this is under the reign of a wild and crazy man. His name is Achashverosh. When he starts at the very beginning, he's still trying to become a king. It happens only in the third year. Why? Because what's he doing in the first 3 years? He's conquering, right? He's conquering. So he doesn't have royalty. And all of this is going to explain why does he do what at that party. He shows off as well because he doesn't have royalty. If he was from royalty, the last thing you would do is show off your wealth. You don't show off your wealth. And he has two parties, and two. We saw that too. Rabbi Lamb pointing that out. That's a subtle device throughout the book. It's going to debunk the culture and the religion of the Persians, right? We're going to be redeemed from that culture and religion. Okay, and all of these other allusions, as Rabbi Soloveitchik and others are seeing, pop up straight from the text itself. The Yom HaShvi'i, the way that we in contrast will use wine, the way they use wine. The Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol ben or la'choshech ben Yisrael lo'ami. We make a Havdalah. Havdalah, and on this I will end. Havdalah means what? To distinguish. Very good, to distinguish. And Chazal asked, where do we place Havdalah in the Shmona Esrei? Where's Havdalah on Saturday night put? In which bracha? Atachonein le'adam das. God, give us brains. We begged for that at the very beginning of the Amidah, right? We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for a good cup. Atachonein le'adam das. So Rabbi Soloveitchik notes, Atachonein le'adam das, Havdalah requires intellect, to be able to distinguish, to be able to see Bayom HaShvi, our Shvi, their Shvi, how our wine, their wine, our way of life, their way of life. Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol, ben or la'choshech, ben Yisrael lo'amim. It is true. It's a fact. They're going to always be, as long as we are committed to that person, to that identity, they will respect us. As soon as we lose it, then they come after us. And that's also being taught in this. So this opening chapter seems like a lot of details to set the tone. It's a very smart literary device, right? You want to know, is this story true? I'll show you it's true. How am I going to show you it's true? I'm going to detail. So you have more to depend on. Okay, now go research. You can find out. I'm going to tell you who exactly the players were and their names, right? You can go now and study in the books of Poras and Madai. You can find out. But that's not the way Rabbi Soloveitchik and others and Rabbi Lamb understand. Here, what is it doing? It's setting the tone for understanding what this book is really all about. It is the contrast of the Jewish people to the non-Jewish people, our attitude towards life, their attitude towards life. And we'll continue as we go through the Megillah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Were the Persian Jews, did they observe the Shabbos? Because they went to this party.
We assume that they did, yes. Why wouldn't?
Because it doesn't really state anywhere.
Yeah, no. The Megillah is not going to tell you that. No, but yes, there was no reason not to think that.
Maybe
Not to
that's
think
why
that.
they were being punished with
Not to
Haman,
think
because
that.
they
No,
were assimilating.
that would be in the Medrash. The Megillah itself doesn't talk about it.
Bringing me here. Amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
Are we binding the books that are, the Chumash that are torn, or are we letting them? Just,
One second, let me just 1 second. Hold on.
So I don't put it
Thank
back.
you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you.
And
Thank
Mom
you,
would say
Rabbi.
it's still good.
It's
Very